Allow me to introduce myself. Hello, this is Philosophia, the podcast. My name is Mem Sahib Amaunet. Let's take a walk as I ask myself 3 questions and provide 3 answers for each. Why am I doing this? 1, I just felt like talking. There are lots and lots of words that want to be said by me. I want to yap. I'm usually quiet, but in this season of my life, I really do feel like going on and on and on about anything and nothing. In public too, I'm following an intuitive call and not asking it too many questions. 2, I enjoy hearing myself talk. I think I'm interesting to listen to. I love conversations with myself. As a child, a part of me always wanted to be a radio host. Actually, I sometimes felt they talked too little, like I'd been left hanging on a loose thread. I am my favorite company. I crack me up and blow my own mind several times a day. In full truth, it's not in my ordinary nature to want to share me, or to want to share my mind like that. But like I've said, I'm feeling led this way. So the trade-off I made was to do it my kind of way and to keep my privacy protected. I'm not hiding. My voice is easy to recognize for a good number of people. I just don't feel like the statement I want to make right now, in either word or deed, is one of putting more than my voice out there. I like that my life is peacefully stashed away from civilization. This podcast is my occasional rejoining act. A part of me feels like this might become famous someday. It really is okay if it doesn't, but something inside says it's better to plan for that eventuality than not. And I know for a fact I'd much rather be in obscurity than in the limelight. I'm okay with my work being famous. I would love that, actually. I don't know that I'm okay with my person being famous. The person behind this, me, is private and reclusive. I don't enjoy people much either, and I figured I'd rather choose the terms before I have no choice. I know the things I think and I say, and they are transformative in revolutionary ways. I touch hearts easily and often say the uncomfortable but deep and absolutely freeing thing. Question 2. What led me here? Burnout. I used to be a therapist before I burnt out myself and took an early retirement. For years, I would say that people didn't come to me for solutions, but for permission. They came to hear that it was okay to be themselves, that they weren't too crazy or too far out. They weren't irredeemable freaks of nature, just human beings doing human things. Most of all, they came to me to hear that loving themselves that way, in the state they had judged as incomplete, imperfect, and therefore unlovable, was in fact okay, perhaps even the right thing to do. Burnout is a big problem, much bigger than we're admitting. So many of the problems we're using elaborate and complicated Englishes to describe can really be summarized into that people are exhausted by having to pretend. The entirety of Earth's cultures right now are pretentious to some degree. There is an expectation of both rigidity and deference to what is considered a culture's prevailing edict at all times. You stick to the script, you don't ask questions, and you don't deviate, except people are fluid, and those like to flow. I noticed it in myself, slowly worked my way out, and I feel ready to show people out, even as I keep walking towards more and more freedom for myself. The second thing is my birth chart. This is literally all my soul came here to do, as far as our cosmic neighborhood is concerned. I have had an interesting interaction with my birth chart, so now I have to tell you the story. I was raised by evangelical, Pentecostal conservatives who found even the Catholic Church to not be Christian enough. Those astrology things were definitely demonic in the home I was raised in. A few years ago, someone offered to read my birth chart for free. They were trying to teach themselves astrology and were therefore looking for test subjects. I was writing a lot on Facebook at the time, and they figured from the tone of my posts and the interactions we were having in our private chat that should such a thing be offered, I'd likely be open to it. At the time, I was seeking answers. Nothing in my life felt like it fit. I didn't even think it could ever fit. So I wasn't even looking for the answers that offer solutions at the time, only explanations. I wanted to know why I was so uncomfortable in my own life. My bones didn't feel right. My heart wasn't beating how I like it to, smooth and calm. My body didn't feel as I wished for it to, and on and on. I didn't know how to describe all of that because at the time, I thought I was just lazy. When that direct message arrived, I sat with it for about 2 weeks, internally figuring out what astrology would open me up to. Eventually, I told myself that if we're living in a neighborhood, each neighbor is going to affect how society functions and even what it looks like. Reading my birth chart would therefore be me knowing what was being said in the heavens the moment my head crowned itself with my mother. What kind of neighborhood did I walk into? What was the shape of my moment? What I didn't anticipate was the accuracy. To be fair, everyone who gets their birth chart read for the first time by someone who has some knowledge of what they're doing will be blown away by the accuracy. For me, it felt like the things I thought were not supposed to be said out loud were just, well, me. So I had to sit with myself and start to figure out who was wrong amongst us. Religion, society, my parents, the stars, or me. The stars and I agreed, so off we went on our merry way, journeying through a relationship that remains one of my most cherished to date. Our cosmic neighbors are good friends to have, y'all. Conversations with God was the third thing. Like I said, I was raised evangelical. Strictly so. I attended abortion rallies in Kenya, no less. My mother fought my outfit choices until I gave her no choice but to be quiet somewhere around my mid-20s. I didn't want to hear all that. There's always that thing that needed to be more in line with whatever Victorian era metabolized into modern African Christian evangelical values considered modest. We were only allowed Christian television and radio for the most part, so I would have to find sneaky ways to listen to what I truly wanted to. Dancing was at first out of the question, and then the youth group wave hit across the evangelical world, and it then became allowed but heavily regulated. You could do some dancing, but stiffen yourself and do it in a way that honors the Lord. I have the kind of booty that punishes you with back pain for not twerking as hard or as long as it wants. So imagine this particular struggle over the few years I was Christian. My back is still recovering. I went to Christian identifying or actively church-run schools from kindergarten to the completion of my undergraduate studies. So many opportunities for things I wanted to try and say, jobs I wanted to take on, were shut down by my parents and certain members of the larger extended family in my youth on account of mtoto atapotea, the child will be lost to the world. There was a set path, and it was rigidly shaped like the insecurities of all the adults around me. An ugly, difficult, unrewarding, disgusting, and pitiful thing to me, that path. A wretched path. Conversations with God allowed me to understand what my years of rebellion against that system had been about. I knew it all felt off to me, so off that I couldn't stand it. Others seemed to cope fine with it. And God knows I tried. Oh, I tried so hard, especially in my high school years, to be the best Christian I could possibly be. But I soon rebelled against even my own self. I spent years feeling faulty and guilty for being faulty. Christianity, well, Abrahamic faiths really, but that's the one I was raised in. The rest I just learned extensively about. And so much of what we think of as culture have always been impossible things for me. I am unable to stomach them, and there isn't a cute or presentable way to say that. My system just couldn't swallow it, so when the bootleg trilogy of books landed in my email, got opened, and subsequently devoured over and over, it felt like coming up for air after nearly drowning. I took my air in all kinds of sizes and gulps. Oh dear, I cannot tell you the number of times I read those books cover to cover. I didn't have any kind of income at the time, so I quietly saved up, skimming off the top of allowances until I could purchase the proper copies off of Amazon and have them shipped to me in Kenya. But first, I purchased the e-versions through a friend's Kindle account, no less, because those books couldn't possibly be found anywhere near the home I grew up in. In Neil Donald Walsh's words, I heard and saw so many parts of myself. It wasn't a complete image of me, for sure the birth chart was, but it was the first time in my life that I made sense to I. I needed that validation so bad in an environment where I was being told to deny myself and carry the cross, to decrease in order for another spirit to increase, to do all kinds of rituals and make all kinds of confessions against my own soul. Because, you know, the heart of man is supposedly so incredibly sinful. There is nothing redeemable about it. Jesus just has to wash it clean with his own blood. Having your self-esteem intact is rebellion and revolutionary in those circles. So rebellious and revolutionary that it is pathologized into all kinds of spiritual, moral, and sometimes even mental ailments. There are people who are labeled crazy for questioning the Abrahamic faiths they were raised in to this day, which always leaves me wondering, who is truly insane? Because how is a person with room for more than one thing, the one whose sanity we question, in a natural environment as diverse as Earth is? This place is teeming with life, each in a different stage of its own evolution, and somehow there's only one God and one right way to access that God? Who is the mad one? It wasn't just the questioning, it was also the kinds of questions that he asked in those books, and the ever gentle yet firm tone of the answers in those books. Maybe because the author is a man, or because the faith I was raised in gendered God as a man. It took me a long while to fully believe I could center myself as divine in the way the book talked about. Many times, it felt like talking with that deliciously intoxicating older man who enjoys facilitating and never interferes with your freedom of choice and expression, because it gives him a sense of virility to tell himself he's keeping up with a young girl over some whiskey on the rocks. I love me an intelligent, well-achieved, calm silver fox, and God in those books felt like the ultimate sugar daddy. Odogu sultani mwenyewe, mambo huku ni ya kifalme tu. I was enjoying fucking around with God like that. He was emotionally stable. Imagine that, an emotionally stable God. There were no threats issued, yet he said what he meant and meant what he said. This God felt quiet, serene, like a perfect day at the beach on a rural island. I had never quite experienced a God with self-esteem. I'd read about other faiths extensively and really enjoyed their various epics, but it wasn't until conversations with God that those other voices of God started to make sense. It's like all of these things were dormant tubs inside of me, and CWG was the internet connection that made them all come alive and work like they're supposed to. It led me to a spiritual awakening, a second spiritual awakening. I had the first one when I was 4 years old, that felt grounded enough to not overwhelm me. From the stories I've heard, spiritual awakenings don't sound fun or easy. People talk about moving from pillar to post, religion to religion, society to sect, and on and on. Part of it is because many religions are practiced in some kind of community and encourage it. So there is an immediate loneliness in having certain illusions shatter. You're by yourself. You cannot go back where you're from, but nothing in your past has truly prepared you to navigate forward, and the resources look scarce. Whether they truly are or not is irrelevant in that moment. In the moment of spiritual awakening, they look and feel that way. There just aren't enough hands to hold the weight of what you're going through. What most people try to do is find a community that can digest some of it. You also have likely heard a lot about not deserting community in the faith you're from. In my case, my tendency to want to keep to myself almost always attracted some kind of commentary on how you shouldn't do that because you never know when and how you'll need people. For many reasons, the household I grew up in found it offensive for me to be quiet and introverted. One of them is that my father is the kind who likes to talk, and I guess he conflated my being articulate and rather clear in my speech as proof that I was just as extroverted as he was, and I'm a firstborn he's proud of. So I kind of get it. He still tries to push me towards his ways with some kind of shame for how unexploring he thinks I am. I don't think my parenting and early education in faith and the centralness of God and the community, even over the person, especially over the person, was particularly unique to me. It's something I still hear being preached on the occasional reel that makes it to my doom scrolling sessions. People feel guilty about it because they were taught to feel guilty. So they do their best to prove to themselves they didn't fall too far off by seeing to it they find another community of faith, quote unquote. Awakenings often lead folk eastwards, sometimes to Muhammad, sometimes to Buddha, sometimes to Krishna, or to Taoism or Confucianism, or, an amalgamation of all sorts of things. But more often than not, people start by going east. If they're African or a member of any of the black diasporas, it might lead them to some kind of cultural faith or spiritual practice. But first, it will have likely led them from denomination to denomination to cults within the faith of origin, or within their faith of origin. It's all fueled by the same kind of guilt. But I personally believe you shouldn't ever rush your roads. You need those, okay? Conversations with God gave me permission, right from the start, to go where I really wanted to go anywhere. Or I really wanted to go anyway, which is inward. It's the single greatest mercy I'm grateful to myself for, all these years later, that I awakened to myself, both times, to my own divinity. But like I said, there was no going back. There was nothing to go back to because it just wasn't mine. There was no one else's divinity to stare into until it fit. The book made it clear that I could keep trying to fit in and delay my own evolution, and there was nothing wrong with it. No one would hold it against me. And I would likely pick up some participation prizes and lessons along the way, but I didn't have to. I could just go straight to me. So I chose me. I feel like by now, it should be obvious that I feel it's time to provide some words for others on this path too. So how do I wish to show up here? First, my structure is simple. I talk, off the top of my head mostly, and you listen. I will let my mind roam and wander as it pleases. I cannot promise a specific frequency or that I will ever care to polish it up or make more or less of anything. My self-esteem is beyond wondering if my thoughts are digestible or popular. I also don't have it in me to process the audio to studio perfection. I like when things sound alive. My favorite recordings are those with the air, static, birds, environmental sounds, children playing, chickens, at the top of their voice. And I understand that these aren't everyone's preferences, but this is my show. Which leads me to the second point. I'd prefer that as an audience, you discuss the podcast's content amongst yourselves. Each episode will be me already having said what I thought at the moment and what I remembered to say. I will seldom come back to read comments, clarify, or engage in debate, if at all. I'll have already said what I had for you that day, okay? I'd love for you to have discussions for sure. Just don't imagine that a sworn hermit is going to do more than they have the energy and capacity to. Besides, the podcast is a kind of offering already. All the goddesses know I wouldn't otherwise talk myself into doing something like this. It had to feel like I'm helping people come to themselves somehow. I'm not here to personally engage or change your mind, only to offer some company for the road and maybe a signpost or two as you explore it to yourself. The third thing is with my privacy honored and respected. Like I said earlier, I have nothing to tell me this work will gain traction and a reputation for itself. But I would rather that on the chance it does, It does so as its own self. I am not the message, and I like my obscurity. See you the next time I feel like saying something.